ঠিক আছে। আর আমি ইংলিশে বলছি, তাই তো?
হ্যাঁ স্যার। So sir, can we start now, sir?
Yes, of course.
Oh. So, good evening and namaskar to everyone. I'm Mayush, representing Voices from the Periphery, and it's both a profound privilege and a heartfelt honor to welcome you all to today's much anticipated lecture on truth, positivist, Marxist, and post-structuralist views. The occasion holds particular significance as we are joined by one of the most distinguished voices in political shaped the landscape of radical political theory through his sustained engagement with Marxism, post-structuralism, and subaltern resistance. Over a distinguished academic career spanning more than 4 decades, Professor Basu has made seminal contribution to the study of Naxalite politics, critical theory, and the emancipatory tradition of South Asia. As Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and Head of the Department of Political Science at Presidency University, Kolkata, he played a pivotal role in shaping the cultural and rigorous intellectual inquiry in one of India's most prestigious academic institutions. Professor Basu's work provides a wide interdisciplinary range, engaging with post-colonial theory, feminism, Ambedkarite thought, and theories of resistance to offer incisive critiques, hegemonic structures, and foreground the voices of the marginalized. His scholarship, including landmark works such as Towards Naxalbari, an account of inner party ideological struggle, Discourses on Naxalite Movement 1967 to 2009, Gender and Naxalite Movement, Red on Silver, Naxalite in Cinema and Postmodernism, Marxism, Postcolonialism, a collection of articles continues to influence generations of scholars and activists alike. In addition to this prolific scholarship, Professor Basu is founding editor of the Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences, a peer-reviewed academic journal published by Scottish Church College, Kolkata. Through this platform, he has consistently nurtured critical voices and fostered vibrant intellectual dialogues and the humanities. Professor Basu's enduring commitment in the politics of exemption in relentless pursuit of epistemic justice mark him as one of the foremost thinkers of our time. It is an honor to have him with us today as we explore divergent conceptions of truth across philosophical traditions. Let us now welcome Professor Basu, and for this generous introduction, up to you, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening, namaskar, adab to everyone present today. I am particularly grateful to Voices from the Periphery, particularly Ayush Dey, for inviting me to this talk. I have seen that you have already invited and arranged important talks by distinguished scholars and writers and thinkers from India and abroad. And I am a most ordinary common teacher. I am very much humbled that you invited me along with these great scholars. Voices from the Periphery has been doing a very significant academic job through their activities, and lot of students of social sciences and arts, humanities, have benefited from their programs. Now, I will come to my topic. Before that, I should most humbly, I should admit that whatever has been said about me is very much exaggerated. I don't deserve that. Anyway, today's topic is truth. Positivist, Marxist, and post-structuralist views. I will discuss these three positions and then very briefly, I will discuss these three positions and then very briefly, I will give a view of my own. Although my knowledge is much limited and my view must seem to every scholar as inadequate, insufficient, but still maybe I would like to give briefly my view. Let us come to the second slide. In any research, any writing, essay, research article, academic books, criticism, critical reviews, discussions, symposia, conferences, seminars, webinars, in every case, we know that the final philosophical objective is finding truth. Some way or another, the scholar is expected to explore some new dimensions of truth or new interpretations about an established truth. For any research that is true, and truth is very much respected in epistemology, not only in epistemology, but also ontology and even in everyday life. Are you talking true? Is he a liar? In judicial proceedings, we know that the lawyers claim to excavate truth from their hidden position. And finally, the judge, with the help of evidences and witnesses and the arguments of the lawyers, the judge, and also with the opinion of the juries if necessary, the judge realizes what is truth and gives her verdict. The point is that right from Plato to Aristotle to Descartes, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Kant, Hegel, and in a special sense, Karl Marx. All philosophers have expressed their immense reverence for truth. If we exclude Nietzsche or to some extent Heidegger, or to a much greater extent Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, etc., the so-called post-structuralist, or sometimes called postmodern philosophers, excluding them, apart from them, most of the Western philosophers, especially the political philosophers, have accorded a very central place to truth. Truth is so much respected that if anyone is proved to be a liar, his social position becomes denigrated. In the constitution of every country, it is always claimed that we worship truth. In the national emblems, in the popular principles, for example, say Satyameva Jayate. In case of India, we express our great respect for truth. Now, what is truth? In a very simple way, anybody can answer that what is happening, that is truth. What exists, that is truth. The fact is truth. Philosophically, this may be called the correspondence theory, which is a very old traditional model from ancient Greek philosophers to medieval thinkers like Aquinas, then early modern thinkers like Descartes, then later modern thinkers, contemporary analytical philosophers of continent. Most of them have agreed with the correspondence theory, more or less. Maybe there are subtle differences. Of course, it happens in case of any philosopher. But on an overall view, overall consideration, we can say that correspondence theory is a very strong, very deeply entrenched model. What does it say? It holds that the truth or the falsity of a representation is determined by how it relates to a reality, whether it accurately describes that reality or not. From Aristotle, John Locke, David Hume, Bertrand Russell, we can name hundreds of philosophers, that truth must correspond to reality. What is, once most probably Aristotle said that truth is saying what is. and what is not is not. The we know the rationalists, they based on reason, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and we know the empiricists, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, founded their understanding on empiricist philosophy. So, empiricism and in particular positivism accepted the correspondence theory of truth. That truth corresponds to reality. What is the position of Marxism? We know Bhikkhu Farek wrote that Marxism also majorly accepted the position of correspondence theory. I would say true, but in a different, in a revised way. We will discuss it later. But correspondence theory of truth is problematized or sometimes rejected, discarded, repudiated, condemned by post-structuralist thinkers. Let us come to the third slide. First, we shall see positivist view. Positivism is based upon the philosophy of empiricism. So very briefly, I will touch upon empiricism. It was its protagonist, the most prominent protagonist was John Locke, a British philosopher, 1632 to 1704. That is, he belongs to the 17th century. We can remember 1688, the Glorious Revolution took place in his time. Empiricism says that knowledge, certain knowledge comes from our experience, which is acquired through our sense organs. Sense organs like, say, our tongue, smell, nose, vision, eyes, skin, touch, and hearing, ear. These, through these sense organs, we acquire experience, and Locke said, we know the theory of tabula rasa, the blank slate. So, whatever knowledge we acquire about truth, that comes through our experience of the reality. Empiricism, if empiricism can be considered as a foundation, then we can say positivism stands upon it. Positivism was mainly developed by Auguste Comte, 1798 to 1857. Also, there was John Stuart Mill. Now, positivism, this word does not mean anything positive in the sense that it is good. We generally say he has a positive outlook about life. This positivism is not that. In philosophy, the philosophy of positivism is based upon empiricism, and positivism comes from the French word positivisme, which comes again from the word positive, positive or positive. I don't know the French pronunciation, maybe positive, TIF, positive, which means imposed upon mind by experience. Imposed upon mind by experience. So positivism is something which deals with our knowledge. It believes that the origin of our knowledge can be understood from the empiricist philosophical position. That means knowledge or information comes from experience. The origin or source of knowledge is experience through sense organs. But positivism is not empiricism. Positivism moves a bit further forward or backward. That is very much relativist concept, problematized by post-structuralism. Anyway, suppose it is a kind of going ahead than empiricism, in the sense that positivism talks about not only the origin of knowledge, but also the nature of knowledge. Auguste Comte said that he believed that society evolves through three stages in its quest for the truth. First, the theological stage. It was based upon religious beliefs. Then the metaphysical stage, where religious beliefs subsided, but abstraction remained. And third, the positive stage. Positive stage comes in the modern period, and after the Enlightenment, 18th century Enlightenment of Europe, positive stage gives emphasis on the empirical data. Concrete empirical fact. And he claimed that positivism is the most advanced stage. Auguste Comte gave emphasis on a quantitative mathematical basis for decision making, and this notion is the foundation of the modern concept of positivism, that is modern quantitative statistical analysis and business decision making. Comte compared society and sociology to the human body and anatomy. Positivism claims that authentic knowledge, certain knowledge, is only scientific knowledge. Only scientific knowledge. So, religious insight or metaphysical realization or revelation, intuition, knowledge, if anything at all, attained through meditation, these are discarded. They are not scientific. Scientific knowledge is possible to acquire only through scientific methods, which is based upon value-free, objective facts. No subjectivism is allowed here. Scientific methods are based on observation, so observable phenomena are considered, experiments, and then verifiability of data. Verifiability of data. And obviously, if you say that through my meditation I have seen this god or that goddess, whatever, then positivism is not going to accept that as a valid knowledge. Knowledge must be verifiable through objective facts and data, measurable quantities. So quantification is very important here in scientific method. Regarding verifiability, perhaps some may remember Karl Popper's objection. He refuted it, saying that not verifiability, but falsifiability is the criterion of scientific truth. Anyway, I am not going into that. Also, another thing, someone may remember that verifiability, if we argue the case of the refutation, then we can say all crows are black. Can that be verified? Not universally. Because some other day, say 100 crows are black, but maybe one day you can find a 101st crow which is not black. So falsifiability, that is tentative, provisional, conditional truth claim, according to Karl Popper, is the mark of scientific knowledge. Anyway, let me drop that. Now, positivism, it gives emphasis on objective fact. What some people have criticized positivism, saying that positivism is like that story that one says that 5 people went to the zoo of the town, 5 blind people came back and said, one said that who touched the leg of the elephant said that elephant is like a pillar. Another who touched the tail claimed that elephant is like a rope, etc., etc. Fragmented, immediately accessible, direct knowledge. That is classical positivism. So it is criticized because it is inadequate. It rules out the role of reason or logic or science in integrating the fragmented parts of isolated knowledge. We know then came logical positivism of the Vienna School, Berlin School of Ayer, Carnap, Schlick, etc. They said that certainly experience is important, but experience must be interpreted through science, logic, or reason. Anyway, now next slide. Marxist view. Before going into Marxist view, I will say that so positivism has left a tremendous impact on academic research and quantification, measurement, value-free judgment, the impartial observer, verification, statistical data collection. All these are associated with positivist research and positivist concept of truth. Natural science, physics, chemistry, these are often associated with positivist research method. And even in social science, particularly, Auguste Comte made an important contribution to sociology, and modern sociology is very much associated with positivist research method. Although sometimes it is being challenged by post-positivism, but there is a predominance in social science also, in political science. In political science, we have heard about behavioralism of USA. That is Almond, Powell, Coleman, Barba, Lucian Pye, David Apter, Edward Shields, S.P. Huntington, Robert Dahl. So many people were doing research along empirical lines of thought and positivist methods of research. Then we come to Marxist view of truth. Marxist view says that there are two parts in Marxist view. First is impact of Enlightenment modernity. We know that in 18th century, Enlightenment and intellectual movement took place in Europe, starting from Western Europe, and Enlightenment modernity gradually emerged along with the Industrial Revolution of starting from 1760 in England. It spread from Western Europe to other parts of Europe and to the rest of the world through colonialism. That is often called colonial modernity, which has been criticized by post-colonial theory of Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, and others. Enlightenment modernity claimed that there is an authentic truth out there, within quotes, out there, outside my mind, outside psyche, outside our subjective thought. That is truth, or you can say reality, or you can say objective fact. Objective fact is universally valid. It is not subjectivist or not relativist. And Marxism is a child of Enlightenment. That means it was very much influenced. Marx and Engels both were very much influenced, and also later Lenin, Stalin, etc. They were very much influenced by Enlightenment ideas of truth. And reason. Man is a rational being, and through reason, we can gradually understand the nature of the world, and society. I thought I would explain cunning of reason, but if time permits, I will do. Then science. Enlightenment glorified science to enormous, tremendous prestige, high status, which is often called scientism by post-structuralists. Scientific truth is the highest truth, absolute truth, authentic truth, certain truth. It is based on reason, certainly. And you know, John Locke once said that every knowledge must prove its authenticity before the judgment seat of reason. Locke was one of the Enlightenment thinkers, early Enlightenment thinkers. Other thinkers were, say, Locke, David Hume, Montesquieu, Condorcet, Diderot, Voltaire, in a critical way, Rousseau, very much Kant, Immanuel Kant. He wrote one famous article in 1784, What is Enlightenment? And also Hegel, in a slightly different way. And also Marx, in a different way. Enlightenment also believed in historical progress. That is, the world history is continuously moving in a unilinear direction towards progress and more progress and more progress, freedom, greater freedom and highest freedom towards the highest freedom of the Geist, of world spirit. And freedom or emancipation is possible. Marxism was very much influenced by these concepts of truth, concepts of enlightenment, such as truth, objective truth, reason, science, scientific truth, scientific knowledge, historical progress, history is moving ahead, and freedom or emancipation of man. But see, I would argue that Marx was a rebel child. He was a child, certainly, but he was a rebel child. He said that truth is there. Objective truth is out there. But it is attainable through materialist dialectics. That is the scientific outlook of the proletarian class. Bourgeois class cannot ultimately attain truth. Middle class, peasantry, petty bourgeoisie, they cannot attain. But proletarian class outlook can attain truth, because proletariat is a universal class. Through it, all kinds of exploitation and ideological illusion can be dispelled, exploitation can be eliminated. Universal class represents the universal progress of history. That does not mean that any factory worker is having truth, not that. Potentially working class is the reservoir of truth, but actually that can be attainable only when they come in touch with Marxism, they come in touch with materialist dialectics and materialist interpretation of history. That is the point. It can be explained further and further. Lots of explanations are there. Why proletarian class is considered the universal class, etc., etc. But the point is that every class has an ideology, and ideology is highly biased by class interest. Bourgeois ideology is biased by bourgeois class interest. But only in case of proletarian outlook, the ideological is continuously becoming the scientific. The ideological, which is relativist, is continuously becoming, is in the process of becoming the scientific truth. Scientific truth is universal objective truth. It continuously transcends the class interest and becomes the scientific truth. And therefore, according to Marxism, reason has a class character. There is no universal reason. There is objective truth, which is attainable through proletarian class outlook. And there is reason, but reason has a class character. And science must be employed in the service of the toiling people, toiling classes. And gradually through socialism and communism, historical progress will be attained. And then freedom or emancipation will be possible. It is not possible. Enlightenment project is not possible under capitalism. That was the point of Habermas. That enlightenment project is incomplete. And Marxism will assert that through class struggle, it is possible to attain. So, whatever you see in political process, political reality, or social life, if you want to know the truth, you must get into three possible ways. According to Mao Zedong, in his famous article on practice, then on contradiction, and then where do the correct ideas come from, he wrote that there are three ways through which scientific truth can be attained. One is class struggle. Second is production activities, taking part in production. And third is scientific experiments in the laboratory. These are the three ways. We come to the next slide. Here you see, I once discussed it in my Presidency University lecture in the Department of Philosophy. So there may be some repetitions. Well, this is the second part of Marxism, materialist dialectics. Materialist dialectics believes that the world has a materialist nature. That means there is no supernatural powers or divine powers behind it. And the world is interconnected. Nothing is isolated. And the world is knowable. The truth about the nature of the world is possible to attain. So it is knowable. But it is true that at this moment, the whole thing may not be knowable, but gradually, step by step over time, the scientific knowledge of truth will develop. It is an endless journey towards knowledge, more authentic knowledge, more authentic knowledge, more authentic knowledge. But there are two streams of Marxism. There are actually many streams. Regarding materialist dialectics, there are two major streams. One is determinist Marxism, which was advocated by Plekhanov, Kautsky, and Stalin. They claim that matter is the source of all consciousness. Matter is primary, consciousness is secondary. Matter is principal, consciousness is secondary. Matter is crucial, and matter determines the nature of consciousness. Material conditions determine the nature of origin and nature of consciousness. They give too much emphasis on material conditions, and therefore on economic mode of production of society. That is why sometimes it is called economic deterministic Marxism. The other one is a marginalized Marxism. Determinist Marxism once predominated over the whole of the world, whole of the international communist parties under the leadership of Stalin. And humanist Marxism is the non-deterministic Marxism, the marginalized Marxism, or you can say humanist Marxism. It was advanced by Antonio Gramsci, Karl Korsch, Georgy Lukács, and Frankfurt School thinkers like Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse, etc. They believe in a dialectical relationship between matter and consciousness. What is dialectical? There are lots of books and articles about this. I have been able to pick up this thing from my study, that matter and consciousness, each is the emergent condition for the possibility of the other. See diagram 1. Matter and consciousness, they each is the emergent, but a continuously emerging condition for the possibility of the other. So matter influences consciousness, consciousness influences matter. Just you see, the table is there. I can understand it. But I can understand it through my human consciousness. If there is no consciousness, if I am a dead body, I cannot understand that the table is an objective reality outside there. So I would say matter is an objective reality standing independently of my consciousness, but this knowledge is available only through consciousness. Matter is an objective reality out there, independently standing outside my mind. But this knowledge is available only to consciousness. So they are mutually, they cannot be considered mutually exclusive. That is the dialectical relationship. I usually give one example, say mother. Mother means nothing. It implies there is a child. Otherwise, whose mother? Similarly, child must be the child of a mother. So, if you conceptualize one, you are inevitably presuming the existence of the other. and they are interdependent. They are dialectically related. Same is the case of theory and practice, subjective and objective, inductive and deductive methods. Generally, Althusser particularly emphasized that ideological illusion acts, it mediates through our perception of the reality. And Marxism can dispel this ideological illusion. And praxis has been emphasized that in a very simple way, when you are practicing a theory and theorizing a practice, during the practice, it is praxis. Now, very briefly, I will come to Engels's 3 principles. Engels said that materialist dialectics has 3 principles: unity and struggle of opposites. That means everything has internal opposites. And like positive, negative, plus, minus, electron, proton, etc. in society, bourgeois class and proletarian class, etc. Unity and struggle of opposites. Because of this contradiction of the opposites, everything is in motion. This is called also law of contradiction. And then we come to quantitative changes, ultimately coming to a critical point, and then a qualitative change takes place. A simple example you can give, that 2 oxygen atoms combine, we get the molecule of O2, oxygen gas. And if you add, if it is possible to add another oxygen atom, then it becomes O3, that is ozone. Similarly, suppose freedom struggle was quantitatively growing, and then ultimately in 1947, the formal political independence was attained. That was a qualitative change. A colony became an independent state. Then I come to the third law, law of development or law of negation of negation. See the diagram 2. It requires a lot of elaboration, discussion. Our time will not permit. I will just briefly say that first there is a thesis, then it gives birth to its antithesis, and see the diagram. At a higher level, thesis is negated and antithesis is negated, and at a higher level, we have the synthesis. Synthesis discards the bad destructive elements of both thesis and antithesis, but synthesis retains, preserves the good constructive progressive elements of both thesis and antithesis. Good things are preserved. Synthesis again gives birth to its antithesis. Synthesis negated by antithesis. Antithesis is again negated. And on a higher plane, we get another synthesis. So it is a spiral, like a spring. Continuously, change or development is taking this path, this course. Society develops in this way. Capitalism, its opposite antithesis is proletarian class. Capitalism is negated, proletarian class is negated, and we ultimately get socialism. Or you can say communism, better. Hegel gave the example, that first family, it is a combination of two things. Good thing is love of members. Bad thing is that it is very narrow. My khandan, my dynasty, family, pride. Family, example, the ancient Greek family. Family is negated by the modern civil society of France, bourgeois civil society. Here, no love, but there is self-interest of the individual members and competition. But there is no narrowness of family. Civil society is marked by broadness. Then antithesis is also negated, and we have the synthesis German nation state. It combines family's love, now expanded, national patriotism, and the greatness, broadness of civil society. But this synthesis, this nation state holds into itself the two moments of family and civil society. They are not totally discarded. In this way, the spiral moves on. And then you see, we have materialist interpretation of history, sometimes called historical materialism, but Marx never used this word because it gives the connotation of a rigid, blind, orthodox scientific law. Marx never thought in this way. Maybe Marx had within himself, there is a contradiction. On the one hand, there is a deterministic trend, and on the other hand, there is a humanistic trend. And there is a tussle between the two. I wanted to discuss Minerva's owl, but I don't know whether time will permit it or not. Materialist interpretation of history, see diagram 3. Here in any society, base is economy and superstructure is a combination of culture and politics. Base determines superstructure. But dialectical Marxism will say that base and superstructure are dialectically connected. One is the condition for the possibility of the other. If you don't have economy, you cannot conceptualize the superstructure of culture and politics. And if you don't belong to the superstructure, having a culture and political awareness, how can you conceptualize the base or economy? Base or economy exists within the milieu of superstructure, and superstructure does the same. So they are mutually dependent. And but according to orthodox Marxism, production plays a very important role, and also class struggle. Class struggle is the driving force of history. And in Communist Manifesto, the first line was discussed by Marx, that all the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. Later corrected that accepting primitive communism. So Marx's concept of truth is very much dialectical. Positivist concept of truth is very much scientific, and Marx's concept of truth is very much dialectical. Subject and object both play an important role in the attainment of truth. You know the famous discussion between Einstein and Rabindranath. Einstein said that before man arrived, the objective world existed, But Rabindranath said, but in order to understand that, it was necessary for the arrival of humanity was necessary with human consciousness. Anyway, and this debate is going on. We come to the last point. Next slide. I thought I would discuss elaborately post-structuralist view, but it will not be possible because of lack of time, because it is a bit, it goes against common sense, it goes against Enlightenment modernity. Very briefly, in pre-modernity in Europe, there was feudalism with rigid hierarchy, irrationality, blind faith, superstitions, prejudices, religious authority, and belief in this. Then came Renaissance in 14th century, and Western modernity emerged gradually. And during the 18th century Enlightenment, Western modernity attained, rose to its culmination. During Renaissance, there was commercial or mercantile capitalism, but during Enlightenment, there was industrial capitalism. And here the main social theory was liberal humanist rationalism. The most important theory, social doctrine of Western modernity, liberal humanist rationalism. It glorified the objective truth, I already said. It glorified reason. It glorified science, scientific truth, scientific knowledge. It firmly believed in historical progress, and it believed in the emancipation and freedom of man. There are two streams. There were. One is post-structuralism, another is postmodernism. Postmodernism, first, we know postmodernism came from the philosophy of existentialism. Say Nietzsche, Heidegger, Sartre. Then in 1920s, we have modernism, a cultural movement in Europe. Say Picasso, Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot. And Baudelaire, Mallarmé, etc. Existentialism critiqued, problematized modernity and enlightenment. Modernism in 1920s, from cultural aspect, it problematized modernity. Modernism problematized modernity. Please note that. Some people think that modernism is the philosophy of modernity, not that. Existentialism made a critique of modernity from philosophical point, and modernism made a cultural critique of modernity. Then in 1950s, cultural postmodernism appeared in USA. Susan Sontag, Robert Venturi, these people, and cultural postmodernism was inspired by existentialist philosophy and modernism of Europe. They made a critique of enlightenment and modernity. They criticized the concept of truth, reason, progress, science, emancipation. That is one. And the other is post-structuralism. Post-structuralism emerged in France. The subject or cogito, the concept of Descartes, was problematized. Structuralism first emerged of Ferdinand Saussure or Levi-Strauss, Freud, and Althusser. These people were structuralists. Structuralism problematized the autonomous, self-conscious subject, which is ahistorical or suprahistorical, above history, above class, caste, gender, race, nationality, above the social conditions. The cogito was conceived, but that was problematized by structuralism. They gave emphasis on structure. Then comes post-structuralism in 1960s. Post-structuralism rejected cogito, problematized cogito, and not only that, it also problematized structure. It went beyond structuralism. Then comes a linguistic turn, gave emphasis on language, langue and parole, etc., and philosophy. And post-structuralism was developed by Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Guattari, Deleuze, Lyotard, Lacan, Baudrillard, etc. So there are two streams, American early postmodernism and French post-structuralism. In 1979, a post-structuralist philosopher, Lyotard, François Lyotard, he wrote a book in French. Its English was published in 1983 as The Postmodern Condition. That means a post-structuralist philosopher is accepting the concept of postmodernism. That is very significant. According to Hans Bartens, it is a very significant event. Then Lyotard said that what is the definition of postmodernism? That incredulity to meta-narratives. Big narratives of truth, claiming universal truth for Hegel's dialectics, for Marx's materialist interpretation of history. All these big claims of grand narratives or meta-narratives are discarded by postmodernism. Incredulity, that means lack of faith in meta-narratives. That is the definition of postmodernism given by Lyotard. So it is a difference. Postmodernism says that meta-narratives create the facts. So the concept of objective fact, objective truth is highly problematized. Postmodernism or post-structuralism is a philosophy of difference, not similarity. It is a philosophy of power, not natural evolution. It is a philosophy of pluralism, not uniformity. It is a philosophy of heterogeneity, not homogeneity. It is a philosophy of localness, smallness, not universal truth, not large truth, big truth. It is anti-essentialism. There is no essence which is the absolute truth. That is problematized. And it is anti-foundationalism. There is no foundational truth. either in ontology or in epistemology. Everything is on the surface, floating. And particularly Foucault said truth is an effect of power and discourse. Discourse means serious statement or a group of serious statements which make us utter a meaningful sentence, which enables us to think, to speak, to write. This discourse is always implicated with power and institutions and language. And discourse creates the truth claim. There is Gandhian discourse, there is BJP Hindutwadi discourse, there is Enlightenment discourse or modernity discourse, there is Marxist discourse. Different discourses have truth claims. They are associated, implicated with power, and they are engaged in keen competition among themselves for occupying our brain, our mind. Just think Gramsci's concept of ideological cultural hegemony. Just think Satyajit Ray's film, Sonar Killa. Or many other films are also there. Agontuk is there. Other films. So you see, truth is an effect of power. Power tells me this is true. Power controls my thought process through discourses, through institutions, through language. And I learn how to think about truth. Once there was an interview in Holland TV, Dutch TV, between Foucault and Chomsky. Chomsky was asked, is there any human mind universally valid truth? Chomsky says yes. Otherwise, humans could not have communicated, could not have been able to communicate with one another. Then Foucault was asked, is there any universal truth in the mind of man? Foucault said, I am interested to know which discourses and power enable us to think about this question. To think whether there is a universal truth or not. How does this question at all emerge in our minds? What is the role of the power, institutions, language, history, culture? So truth is an effect of power. In ancient Greece, homosexuality was not considered an abnormal perversion. But now, many of our ministers are saying that homosexuality, LGBTQIA+, these people are abnormal, they are diseased, they are pervert, they should be treated in a hospital. So you see, what is normal is an effect of power. Truth recognizes what is normal and what is abnormal. There are many other things Foucault said. The main thing is that, and Jacques Derrida said, his concept is known as deconstruction. Just two things I will mention. I'm already 13 minutes late. One is deconstruction means dismantling the boundaries. And binaries. We are habituated to think in terms of boundaries and binaries. Suppose Hindu and Muslim, they are mutually exclusive, so binaries. They do not share anything in common. But deconstruction will say that the boundary of Hindu is not so concrete, permanent, stable. Boundary of a Muslim is also not that absolute. They are continuously internally linked. They mutually constitute each other. Without Hindus, you cannot think of Muslims, and without Muslims, you cannot think of Hindus. Hindu, the very name came from the Central Asian, Arabian Muslims. And Durga Puja or any, there are contributions of Muslim mysteries, Muslim workers. So, similarly, you see, Europe and East and West, this is not a binary. The boundaries are interpenetrable, porous boundaries. Gender, male and female are not binaries. There are many so-called female characteristics in man and many male characteristics in woman. That is why deconstruction gives emphasis on so-called eunuchs, bilingual, bisexual, LGBTQIA+. They have become so important today. Similarly, not day, not night. Dismantle the boundary and you find the gray area, twilight, dawn. And secondly, plural meaning of texts. No text has an authentic single meaning, according to deconstruction. Text is open to interpretation, endless interpretations. It largely depends on the reader also, not only on the author. Author's intention is not so much important, but the context in which the reader reads and interprets the text, the cultural context, the linguistic context, and if you add Foucault power context, these are very much important in creating meaning. And therefore, post-structuralism will advocate the concept of a plural truth. Plural truth. Truths are there. And concern for, they naturally, in contrast to Marxism gave emphasis on class-centric approach and economic-centric approach, but post-structuralism gave emphasis also on gender, caste, race, nationality, culture, nature, and history. Also, history should be mentioned, and language. Okay. If you want my position, if it is asked, let me discuss in question answer. Sorry, I am 18 minutes late. Sorry, Ayush.
No, sir. Sorry, no, sir. It's a wonderful lecture, sir. And thank you for this wonderful sharing a wonderful with us about the various views of truth. So now we will move into our question answering session. I will ask who are seeing the lecture from our YouTube and Facebook channel. They can post their questions there, and I will just ask the questions for them to directly serve. And we have some questions. And so may I ask the questions, sir?
Yes.
Okay. So, Arnav Rohit.
Can you put it on the this board so that I can read it.
I am not sharing my screen. I'm not able to share my screen.
Okay.
So I am reading it, or if you say, I can write the question in the chat box.
Yeah, chat box.
Okay,
Not
okay,
board,
okay.
chat box. But if you have difficulty, you can send it to my WhatsApp number.
No, sir. I will just type it. Just give me one sec. I am just typing those questions. Yes, sir. I just posted the first questions asked by Arnold Rakshit.
Rakhi Mundul. One by one, let me answer.
Yes, sir.
What is the first question?
The
About
first question is, sir,
Baudrillard?
yeah, in light of Baudrillard's theory of simulacra and hyperreality, how can we meaningfully speak of in quote truth in a post-colonial world where the real is no longer distinguishable from its representation? Does the post-colonial condition, already shaped by mimicry and erasure, render truth not only unstable but fundamentally unknowable within both positivist and Marxist frameworks?
It is a very important question, but please, can you show me?
Pardon, sir?
Can you show me the question
Sir,
written form?
it's on the chat box, sir. It's
Oh,
on the chat
already
box.
given.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
already.
Yes, fine. Now, the beginning part is missing here.
Sir, I posted the whole question in light of Baudrillard's theory of simulacra. I am reposting, sir.
Acha.
So now I just reposted the question. Is it visible?
No, the last part. Oh, yes. In light of Baudrillard's theory of simulacra and hyperreality, how can we meaningfully speak of truth in a post-colonial world where the real is no longer distinguishable from its representation? Does the post-colonial condition, already shaped by mimicry and erasure, render truth not only unstable but fundamentally unknowable within both positivist and Marxist frameworks? It is a very nice, insightful, serious question. But the point is that uh, we have not discussed post-colonial theory, which has certainly been inspired by post-structuralism and postmodernism. But here I can very briefly say that Baudrillard's theory of simulacra and hyperreality has shown. Baudrillard is a postmodern thinker, French. This theory has shown how the reality, the concept of reality and the concept of truth have been undermined in today's world. And the conventional understanding of truth and reality has largely disappeared under the impact of postmodern society and postmodern thought process. Particularly if we look at post-colonial world, as you wanted me to discuss. In post-colonial world, we know that the colonial modernity penetrated along with colonialism, and the postmodern thinkers were not very aware or concerned about the colonial and post-colonial world, be it Foucault or Derrida or Lacan or Baudrillard or Deleuze or Guattari, whoever. Postmodern ideas or post-structuralist ideas were innovatively applied to post-colonial world by other thinkers like Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Escobar, also to some extent Gayatri Chakraborty's Spivak or Partho Chatterjee or Dipesh Chakraborty. And this application showed that the colonized people nurtured a concept of truth and reality, largely along the lines of enlightenment. And still it is not the time for the colonized people to understand in their everyday life the impact of Baudrillard's theory of simulacra and hyperreality. In the way the Americans see the park, what is the name of the park? Disney World. And also the other imitations. There are certain imitations of the Egyptian pyramids, or we sometimes we have in Eco Park, in Kolkata, we have certain imitations, but they are not so pervasive like the French Madame Tussauds Museum or Disney Park or similar artifacts. It is true that at Lake Town Crossing we have an imitation of the London Watchtower, Big Ben. But still we must say that in the third world society or a post-colonial society, Baudrillard's theory of simulacra and hyperreality it is my personal opinion, is not very relevant. If you say the way Baudrillard said that Iraq war is not happening, and the way TV telecast say the what is that Indian army, the sudden attack after Pulwama, surgical attack, or recently Pahalgaon, after Pahalgaon, the attack. All these things are truly very much infested with fake videos, doctored videos. Many things are there in our society also. But as a whole, in a post-colonial society, you cannot describe simulacra or hyperreality as the main feature of our society. Maybe our suffering, our poverty, our lack of development, our people at the below the poverty line, our crises, our insecurity, our religious conflicts, our caste conflicts, our patriarchal regime, all these things are so real, causing so much real distress, real suffering, that I have doubts if Baudrillard's theory can have equal appeal to Indian society as it had to French society. Okay, and then you see where the real is no longer distinguishable. I said that real and its representation are much more indistinguishable in Western society. Particularly, Canada, USA, American society, Canadian society are very much described as post-industrial society of Daniel Bell, or say postmodern society as described by Lyotard, or say that geography David Harvey. These things are there, or Frederick Jameson. But in case of India, I don't think it is very much relevant. You said that does the post-colonial condition already shaped by mimicry and erasure render truth not only unstable but fundamentally unknowable within positivist and Marxist frameworks? Everything I agree with you, but only with the difference, in the writings of Homi Bhabha, same but not equal. There is a difference. Colonial modernity gave us modernity, but not the same. So in post-colonial condition, there is mimicry, there is erasure, but still not to that extent about which Baudrillard's theory has been applicable, has been able to meaningfully describe the condition of the West European society. To some extent, it is true, and positivist and Marxist frameworks, I agree that these post-structuralist views are very important, but in case of colonial modernity, in case of post-colonial society, I don't think that the distinction between truth and post-truth has disappeared totally. Still now, we can be engaged in the quest for recovering truth from post-truth. That is my understanding in case of a post-colonial society. Next.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question in the chat box. It's asked by Rafi. I'm just taking the question. Rafi is asking that to what extent can the positivist conception of truth, grounded in objectivity, imperial verification, and value neutrality, be critiqued as a form of epistemic violence that erases the political, historical, and material conditions of knowledge production, especially when viewed through the lens of Marxist and post-structuralist critiques.
Please, you repost it after the previous one.
Okay,
I cannot see it here. That's why if I go above, I can see.
Yes, sir. Give me 1 second. Sir.
Rakhi Mondol. This one.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. I can see it. To what extent can the positivist conception of truth, grounded in objectivity, empirical verification, and value neutrality, be critiqued as a form of epistemic violence that erases the political, historical, and material conditions of knowledge production, especially when viewed through the lens of Marxist and post-structuralist critiques? Certainly, I fully agree with you. Maybe there are some contributions definitely made by positivist conception of truth. For example, sometimes objectivity is required, empirical verification sometimes is necessary. Value neutrality is not at all possible, but we can admit our value bias, and then we can make the reader conscious and aware of our own value judgment. That is possible. Yes, I will agree that most of the time, mostly, majorly, positivist conception of truth is a form of epistemic violence. Because if we look into knowledge of what? Knowledge of truth. Now, truth includes not only objective facts, not only empirical data. Truth can point out value judgment, but cannot absolutely exclude it. So truth includes, actually these points were very much highlighted by hermeneutic philosophers like, Schleiermacher or Dilthey, Gadamer, or Heidegger. And this positivist concept of truth was vehemently attacked by the critical theory of Frankfurt School. And also by Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist philosopher. The point was this, that Stalinist regime or Bolshevik kind of Marxism once became so much positivist that it ultimately distorted truth. Actually, we know that there are political, historical, material, and of course cultural, you have not mentioned it, cultural conditions of knowledge production. Marxism pointed it out very clearly, although giving more emphasis on class outlook and economic interpretation. And post-structuralists like Foucault gave emphasis on power, Derrida gave emphasis on language, hierarchy in the text. So the question of power comes. If we view the positivist conception of truth through the lens of Marxist and post-structuralist critics, we will certainly consider it as largely a form of epistemic violence. If you do not include the cultural factor, the historical factor, the linguistic factor, the philosophical factor, the epistemological factor, the factor of consciousness, thought, if you only focus on objective facts, which is supposedly value-free, then you are becoming too naive. It is not reality. It is not truth. Truth is much more complex. There are subtle aspects of truth. Mutual constitutions are there. You cannot overrule by a oversimplistic concern for quantification, measurement, and verification. This much I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will take one last question because of the time constraint. There are so many other questions also. I can send you to it WhatsApp other questions, but we will take the last question. It's from our Facebook. It's asked by Sujit Dasgupta. He is asking.
Yes.
Pardon, sir?
You please send me all the questions through WhatsApp for my own development. And you give now the last question here.
I also post the last question in the chat box, sir.
Yes, yes.
Insanity of the concept of truth in all its philosophical ramifications and had in effect paved the way for what we now identify as the postmodernist relativism of reason and rationality and the collapse of the grand governing narratives of social formations and civilizational certainties.
I can see here Nietzschean epistemic gloom. Are you talking of that?
Yes, sir.
He is a senior friend of mine. The anti-enlightenment
Yes,
Nietzschean epistemic gloom has totally negated both the validity and sanctity of the concept of truth in all its philosophical ramifications, and had in the effect paved the way for what we now identify as the postmodernist relativism of reason and rationality and the collapse of the grand governing narratives of social formations and civilizational certainties. I have up to this here. This is a comment. Ayush, is there any question which I cannot see now?
I mean, just for extreme. Sir, am I audible?
Yes. No, I cannot hear you now.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Oh, yes, sir. We just wants to respond to you this following proposition.
Okay, it ends here, civilizational certainties. May I be sure about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. Uh, Professor Dasgupta, uh, my position is that perhaps I am oscillating between, like a pendulum, between Marxism and post-structuralism. And perhaps this oscillation is has been possible for me to conceptualize because of the influence of post-structuralism. Because orthodox Marxism will never allow this kind of oscillation. But my actual position is that, honestly speaking, I think that the Marxian rigidity and orthodoxy about certainty of absolute truth, and particularly considering class position and economy centrism, economic determinism, uh, I cannot agree with that. On the other hand, I think postmodern relativism is also an extreme position. I cannot accept the postmodern epistemology. So, my position is that certain things of post-structuralism are very insightful, such as Foucault's concept of discourse, power, and the glorification of subjugated, marginalized knowledges, marginalized people, their resistance, micro-level resistance against disciplinary regime and governmentality. These ideas help me a lot to understand modern, especially modern Western society, and to some extent, modern Indian society. But Foucault's extreme relativistic epistemology, I don't think acceptable for me. Again, about Derrida, I very much agree that there is a hierarchy of power in every text, and text is not only a book or article. Whatever I see, I try to interpret is a text. So a social system, so economic system or political system, text is open to interpretation. Endless interpretation. And I also think that the boundaries which create such rigid binaries are extremely vulnerable, and they should be dismantled. The binary of man and woman, the binary of Hindu and Muslim, the binary of European and colored people should be dismantled. That can be a strong weapon in the hands of those who want to fight against all kinds of discrimination, who want to fight for justice. Perhaps Derrida once said that justice is a concept which cannot be deconstructed. Everything else can be deconstructed. So I agree that the enormous contribution of Marx's critique of capital, critique of the relationship between capital and labor, critique of capitalism, and many other things in Marx must be appreciated. But that kind of Marxism I want to avoid, which will discard any other new critical theories. So I am in favor of a dialogue between Marxism and post-structuralism. That is my position.
Thank you, sir. By this question, I will end this session. Thank you, sir, for joining us and for enriching us with your wonderful lecture, wonderful thoughts. I will also send you all the questions in your WhatsApp. And so, thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.